and welcome back to another episode of Injustice For All MMA. My name is David, and this episode is for UFC Fight Night, Machado Garry versus Prates. This episode is late because that's just what it's used to at this point, but let's start off with the first fight of the night, Chandler versus Edwards. There's really nothing to talk about here other than the fact that when I watched this fight, I noticed that there was a shiny little number next to Chandler's name. And I thought to myself, how in the world is Chandler ranked? Now, if you're not familiar with her last few fights, her last win was 2 fights ago versus Josiane Nunes. And I'm thinking to myself, I don't believe she was 135 at that point. So the rankings are weird. They make no sense. And not even looking at that fight, if you were to just go based off of all her fights, she shouldn't be anywhere near the rankings. It just goes to show that the women's bantamweight division is really, really scanty. And at this point, who knows who's going to fight for the championship next? All right, the next upcoming championship fight is Juliana Pena and Kayla Harrison. Who's the number one contender for that? Is it Norma Dumont? Most likely Norma Dumont. But other than that, it's no one else. No one else is. That division is barren. Oh, actually, no. There's Raquel Pennington. There's Macy Chasson. So besides those those 3 women, it's pretty scanty. And you can tell because when Chelsea Chandler has a number 15 next to her name before fighting Edwards, that's how you know we're looking at the bottom. We're looking at a really low a low point in this division. Let's go to an actual fight to talk about. First honorable mention is Blackshear versus Alatengheili. I had this 30-27 for Blackshear. In the first round, Blackshear outstruck Alatengheili by about 20 strikes. Second round, he outstruck him by 7 strikes. In the third round, he outstruck him by 20 strikes again. I mean, very, very easy round to score. You go to the judges' scorecards here, and I think I marked it down because there was just some goofiness here. 30-27 Chris Lee, 30-27 Eric Colon, and then Derek Cleary, he has the bad scorecard, 29-28. He gives the second round to Alatengheili. Honorable mention to him. That's ridiculous. I will say, though, that in that round, Blackshear's outstriking Alatengheili. Haley starts to push the pace, and he's doing a lot better. By the end of that round, by the last minute of that round, relatively even on strikes. Alatengheili's maybe up by a little bit. Blackshear powers up, so to speak, and then starts to outstrike him towards the end. He outstrikes him by a big enough margin to where there is no scorecard, there's no need for a 10-9 to Alatengheili in the second round. So honorable mention there. That's ridiculous. You go to the next honorable mention, and it's Gutierrez versus Castaneda. This fight ended in a split decision. Anytime Buffer is taking 10 years to get the scorecard, you know it's a split decision, or you know there's something weird on the scorecards. This was stupid. I don't know what someone saw to think that this was in any way or form a split decision, or that Castaneda banked 2 rounds somehow. I don't know where you could see that. Split decision. I had a 29-28 to Gutierrez. First 2 rounds to Gutierrez, obviously. Last round definitely to Castaneda. You go to the descriptions here, and first round, even on strikes, they're just kind of trading strikes, really, up until Gutierrez then drops Castaneda pretty much near the end of the round, and that gives him the first round. You go to the second round, Gutierrez outstrikes Castaneda by about 8 strikes. And then the third round, it's close on the feet, but then Castaneda has a takedown with some ground and pound for about 2+ minutes. Not a lot of ground and pound, but that's the defining thing that wins him this third and final round. I don't know how you can see the second round for Castaneda. That doesn't make sense, but someone gave it to him. You go to the judges' scorecards. And Travis Busking, his scorecard reflects mine 29-28. So does Saul D'Amato. And David Hoyt, he gives the second round to Castaneda, last round to Castaneda, first round to Gutierrez. Honorable mention, it's a shitty scorecard. Next honorable mention, Schnell versus Flick. This was a really fun fight to watch. I had this 29-28, first round for Flick, last 2 rounds for Schnell. The fight has so many weird dynamics. I didn't have a problem with commentary tonight, so there won't be a lot of commentary talk. Even though I don't like commentary, I say this every week. I don't like commentary, but no issues with commentary. No bias, no supreme bias here from Laura Sanko because she trained in that city. No supreme bias from Felder if he came across a person who's from his hometown. And nothing super obnoxious from what's his name? From Brendan Fitzgerald. There was that joke that was corny where he talks about Carlos Prates being cool. It would have landed for me, really, if he didn't laugh while he was saying it, because it was actually really funny. But I don't know. He was setting it up really well. Of just like, there's very few people that are cool, and Carlos Prates is cool. Like, he knew it was corny, so he had to emphasize the is cool, and that was fucking lame. But it was really cool. It was really nice. But beyond me shitting on commentary all the time. Schnell versus Flick. First round, Flick had 2 takedowns with some ground and pound for about 2+ minutes. Second round, Flick had a takedown and a reversal, but what really it was a lot of moving on the ground for both fighters. But what was the real defining thing is Schnell had 2 reversals. Every time he would reverse, he's landing ground and pound. Significant ground and pound. Okay, and he had a submission attempt as well towards the end of the round. Here's the problem. Dan Miragliotta had brain farts twice, to the point where I was thinking, he's doing the main event, and if he fucks something up, I'm gonna break my computer screen, because in the second round, he puts his hands on the fighters, which he almost stops this fight on accident because he's hearing the clapper for the 10-second marker, and instead of him hearing the 10-second marker and keeping his hands away from Schnell, you can argue that he maybe stops a finish there. Now, who said, this is why I'm always a fan of fighters who hold in the submissions long enough, like submissions after the person taps, because we had that situation with Bueno Silva where she was like, no, she tapped. And still to this day, we don't know if the fighter she fought, I can't remember her name, we still don't know if the fighter she fought actually tapped. A judge said she tapped, but no one else saw it. There was no angle that showed that she tapped. So I can't say for certain. And so when fighters hold it in and wait till the ref pries their hands off, I'm a fan of that. And in this case, you have a situation where Schnell actually kept his hands together and was like, that was the clapper. I'm assuming he realized that was the clapper and not the bell and not the horn. And he just held it in. But you don't know whether it was a heavy squeeze, and then when he got touched, he lessened the squeeze. That's something that Felder was pointing out. I don't know if that was the case. I didn't think that for a second. I just thought he was holding it in until Merg was pulling him off. Who knows if Schnell was lessened his squeeze because of what Miragliotta did. Regardless, Miragliotta was fucking up. He almost fucked up that fight. He almost fucked up the Amorim versus Viana. What's her goddamn name? Amorim versus Viana fight, where Amorim had a submission in. A couple seconds left, granted, but he almost stopped that as well, too. Thank goodness nothing bad happened in that fight as well. Go to the third round. Schnell had 2 reversals, with ground and pound, and he outstruck Flick on the feet by about 8 strikes. This whole round belongs to Schnell, 29-28. That's what you got it. You go to the judges' scorecards. the judges' scorecards. And there's nothing really to talk about. All the judges have their scorecards. Their scorecards reflect mine. I just wanted to talk about the reffing here. You go to the next honorable mention, and it's Brown versus Dalby. This KO by Brown was nuts. In my head, I was thinking in that whole second round where they're just swinging. My head thought that KO was going to land for Dalby, just the way the tide was turning, really. Okay. KO finished by Brown in the second round at a 10-9 for Dalby in the first. We're going to talk about the scorecard. How the fuck do you score this first round for Brown? It makes no sense. It's never scored this way. Yet every week we have people just changing the criteria of what is what. And it makes no fucking sense. First round, Brown is outstriking Dalby. He's outstriking Dalby by about 10 plus strikes. Okay, it's not a supreme heavy margin to where this drop that happens next doesn't matter. He outstrikes him well. Okay, and Dalby then drops him bad. And this round now belongs to Dalby. The round now belongs to Dalby. Instead, it's not given to Dalby. Okay, you go to the second round where Brown comes back and he continues to outstrike Dalby, but then Brown gets caught, Dalby gets caught, they both start trading, and Dalby gets finished for the first time in forever. So, for the first time ever, allegedly. So, I don't have the sheets on me. So, I'm looking at this first round and I'm thinking to myself, why is it scored wrong? Brown didn't outstrike him so bad to where this round still belongs to Randy Brown. Chris Lee gives a 10-9 to Brown. So does David Hoya. The only person who has the correct scorecard is Eric Colon with a 10-9 to Nicholas Dalby. Honorable mention to those two. It's a ridiculous scorecard. Absolutely ridiculous. We go to the next honorable mention, and it's Pereira versus Magomedov. This fight, I knew when I saw this a couple weeks ago. I thought to myself, it's two guys who run out of energy. Two guys who run out of gas. Granted, Magomed's last fight, he was gassing out, but the person he fought just couldn't stop getting taken down, and so it worked in his favor in that fight. In this fight, it also worked in his favor that he won, but a lot more sloppier, given that I thought he was going to push the pace a little bit more in the second. After the first round, he just gassed. Pereira gassed after halfway through the first, just based off of what was happening to him, and it was a poor fight because of their cardio, and it was a poor fight because, the commentary mentioned a couple times, like, you have all this energy. If you're gonna gas out, if you're one of those gas out fighters, just do all that bullshit in the first round. And I thought to myself, no, that's stupid. Let them. If their game plan was, because they mentioned that Pereira's corner's game plan was, hey, wait till the last round and explode. Problem is, he can't do that. He does not have the ability to explode in the third round after everything he's endured, not only the first two rounds, but even after just walking around in the first two rounds. He can't do the shit he does in the first, in the third. So the best way for him to really win is to explode in the first, and they mentioned that on commentary, or they debated that a little bit on commentary. So let's go to the fight. I had this 29-28 to Magomedov, first round for him, last round for him. I put a close mark in the third round to maybe entertain the possibility that you could argue it for Pereira, but really he doesn't win the third round. And then the second round for Pereira as well. You go to the descriptions here. Okay, in the first round, Magomed had a takedown, and he outstruck Pereira by about 10 plus strikes. This is 100% his. Second round is where we get into the bad part. Magomed is slowing down, I'm assuming, to recover for the third round, because he can't get a takedown on Pereira. And he's not spamming takedowns on Pereira, but once he tries in the second round and can't get it, he quits. He just decides, all right, it's time to just walk around for 5 minutes. Pereira, he's out of gas, so they just start trading strikes. And it's obvious that Pereira outstrikes Magomed by a few strikes. Now, it's not by a lot. My counter says 2 strikes. But he outstrikes Magomed. And I think he wins this round. Definitely. I think he definitely wins the second round. The third round, it's close on strikes with the edge to Magomed. They're trading strikes. And while Pereira possibly outstrikes him barely in this third round, all the strikes coming from Pereira are lazy and lackadaisical. All those strikes coming from Magomed are much heavier, and they land a lot cleaner on Pereira. The third round goes to Magomed. You go to the judges' scorecards, and while I want to give an honorable mention, I won't, but all three judges, Saul D'Amato, Travis Busking, and Derek Cleary, all give a 30-27 to Magomed. I think the second round goes to Pereira, but you really, in this sort of fight, in these type of fights, you can't really complain that often. You go to the next honorable mention. And before we get to the last fight of the night, because that's the last honorable mention, Smith versus Zhang. We knew who was going to win. We knew who was going to lose. Zhang wins by TKO. There's nothing really to talk about other than just the theatrics and the narrative around just Anthony Smith. He's retiring. He's gone. He's an octagon legend, according to Bruce and his intro. And he's an octagon legend just based off of the work and the time he's put in the octagon. And that's beautiful. But over the last few fights, Anthony Smith has gone from tough-nosed fighter, veteran, gritty, to the fans hate him because of just the things he says. And I don't really blame him, because I don't know how I would react in those settings too. A part of me wanted to be like, yeah, you're kind of immature. Everyone hated you when you said that thing about Alex Pereira, about how he's beatable and this and that, when in fact he probably would have starched Anthony Smith. And there's just a lot that makes Anthony Smith unlikable. And I don't want to say I dislike him, because I kind of I like Anthony Smith, but it's hard to like someone when they make themselves unlikable on purpose, whether that be on purpose, like a Colby, or on accident because your personality is just really off-putting. Like Kevin Holland is likable if you want to like him, but he's unlikable because his personality is very fucking off-putting. And with Anthony Smith, he's very calm and has a soft demeanor, but he can be a dickhead at times. And there's two examples here. One that may not be his fault, but kind of his fault. He loses the fight. He gets up. He sees someone in the crowd, and he just puts the middle finger, and then he runs to the cage and says, "Fuck you." And then I've never seen this before, at least in MMA. They put the spotlight on, and they put it in the crowd where Anthony Smith is directing it towards, and we don't even know who he's talking about, because everyone kind of just stands still and they're like, it wasn't me. I don't know what's going on. We don't even know what was said. Now maybe I have to go watch like a post-fight interview. I'll probably go listen to one and see what happened. But that's an example of you just lost and you're spazzing out on a fan when that's the last thing of your concern. In this fight, he really put up little to no effort. If I remember, he got outstruck from the moment the fight started. He was outstruck. I don't think he offered anything of substance to deter Zhang from wailing on him. And Herzog, who is probably one of the best refs in the business, did what I thought was one of the most obvious, I'm going to let you get hit for 40 more strikes because this is your last fight, to try and wiggle out of this and survive. And he said, before he hit his move, Anthony, because it's funny, right? Herzog was the last, when Anthony Smith went through the controversial, this fight should have been stopped fight against Glover Teixeira. That was the same thing where he was given 40 million opportunities. Now, granted, that was a different Anthony Smith. That was a much better version of Anthony Smith than it is now. A lot more in shape Anthony Smith, by the way. The most recent Anthony Smiths he's been looking a lot more chunkier. But beyond that point, the Anthony Smith back in the COVID era was a lot healthier, a lot leaner, and really was more willing to survive heavy onslaught. In this fight, before Herzog even brought up the, hey, I'm going to start my shouting of move Anthony, before that even happened, I think he endured a heavy load of strikes. They weren't just hitting the arms, they were landing clean on him. And I was thinking to myself, already in that moment, oh, the fight should have been stopped. Like, the moment that ground and pound started, the cut happens, the ground and pound occurs, and I'm thinking to myself, oh yeah, we can stop this here and we're good. Like, there's no issue, no one's going to call for an early stoppage, none of that. We get at least a good, I don't want to exaggerate because, time looks a lot different from what you say, a good 10 to 15 seconds of he's getting hit before we get the move Anthony. And once we get the move Anthony, I really wish I counted how many times Herzog says move Anthony. He said that longer than a normal ref says that. Move Anthony, move Anthony, move Anthony. Then he crouches, move Anthony. Move. He let Zhang get off some shit for a good, again, exaggerating, a good 20 to, not 20 to 30, a good 10 seconds of like, I'm going to let you just get hit with ground and pound. I think that's the right marker. 10 seconds of, I'm just going to let you get hit with ground and pound. Because he was really giving him a chance. And instead, he just, I don't know. It's over at that point. And while it's beautiful, they gave him like a send-off. He gets sent off gracefully, but the way he gets sent, the way he sends himself off is another reason why the narrative on him will look really unlikable, right? Because his whole career starts off as like gritty veteran, legend killer, and it progresses to, oh man, he's not a quitter, he's not a loser because he didn't take the title when he got fouled, which is a good thing. That and the narrative on that, and then, even though most people probably would have taken the title, I would have. Come on. Who knows how your career ends up. But anyways, to now, a person who just missed the plot on a lot of fighters, he gets, before the send-off, before the cool little promo the UFC kind of put out on him because they knew it was his last fight, he does his post-fight interview, and the first thing he says, or one of the first things he says is, 5 years ago, this guy's beatable. And I thought to myself, why would you fucking say that? Why would you, don't say that. You look goofy now. You look dumb. You look mean. And not in the cool, I'm fighting way. 5 years ago, a guy like that is beatable. You just congratulated him and said, "Oh man, he'll go far." But a guy like that is beatable 5 years ago. Yeah, I know. If you watch Zhang, you're like, yeah, he's beatable. But who cares? That's the game here. Imagine if every fighter going out was just like, yeah, 5 years ago that guy's beatable. Well, no shit. Duh. Everyone's beatable 5 years ago. Green and whatever. Like, come on. What are we talking about? But it's stuff like that in that moment I heard and I went, ugh. Not a way to be sent off gracefully. So, I don't know. That's all I have on Anthony Smith. We go to the last fight of the night. Machado Garry versus Prates. Speaking of narratives, there's this thing in MMA where narratives kind of rule over like what you actually saw in fights. For 3 fights in a row, the narrative on Volkanovski against Holloway was, first fight, he just did some tippy tappy shit and he kind of like escaped on a decision to a victory. Second fight, everyone thought was a robbery. It wasn't a robbery when the narrative of that fight should have been a comeback. He came back, he won 3 rounds straight. The narrative on that was it was a robbery, when in fact that wasn't the case. The third fight was, well, I guess he just caught Holloway at the right time and he 50-pieced him. When it should, to be fair, the narrative on that fight was correct. He outclassed Holloway and he beat him and he 50-pieced him. Boom. But the narrative on those 2 first fights for that trilogy is just nonsense. It's absolute nonsense. You go to even the Valentina Shevchenko versus Grasso trilogy, and the narrative on that was, well, Grasso was outstriking Valentina Shevchenko, when in fact that wasn't the case. You can only find 2 rounds where she was legitimately outstriking Valentina Shevchenko. First round of the first fight, 5th round of the second fight, and then maybe you can find another round somewhere in those first 2 fights, but you can't. In the third fight, she wasn't outstriking her at all. So it sometimes narratives just eliminate what we actually saw in fights, and then you come down to this Prates versus Garry fight, and in my head I thought to myself, well, Gary's going to wrestle. We all knew he was going to wrestle him. Everyone thought he was going to wrestle him, and he did. But he really didn't. Most of it was all just technique and moving side to side, laterally, stuffing him in certain cases, which was very interesting. Pretending he was going to take him down, but then not really taking him down, and then eventually actually taking him down. You come to this fight, I had it 49-46. This is the correct scorecard. Anything else is blasphemous. You go to the first round. Garry outstrikes Prates by about 9 strikes. He's outstriking him well. Right? He does a little tippy-tappy stuff here and there, but then he starts to legitimately start to outstrike him and land heavy strikes on Prates. Second round is when you realize, by the end of this round, you realize, oh, Prates is losing this fight. He outstrikes him by 23 strikes in this second round. Third strikes, Machado Garry finally gets some takedowns. He gets 2 takedowns with a little bit of ground and pound. Okay, and outstrikes Prates on the feet by about 24 strikes. Back in the first round, though, he trips Prates. He lands on his back, and then he lands a few strikes on him. I don't want to call it ground him up, but he lands a few strikes on him there. That gives you the indication that this fight is going to be really, really different. Fourth round is where we get into some baloney. Okay, Prates starts to do a little bit well. Right, landing some. Everything starts to slow down now for Garry, right? Because he's moving backwards. He's definitely starting to gas out. He's been moving a lot, and Prates is going forward the entire time. But Garry is starting to slow down. But regardless of him starting to slow down, Garry gets a takedown. He doesn't really do anything with it. He gets a takedown. And this is the bullshit that pisses me off in the judging thing. While Garry is unable to hold down Prates, and Prates is getting up from his takedown, he got up from the takedown, and he's deterring all the takedown attempts from Garry, he still gets outstruck. He gets outstruck very well in this round. He gets outstruck by 12 strikes. He wins this round definitely. Okay, you cannot give this round to Prates. It's only the 5th round where he wins, but here's the situation here. Garry is outstriking Prates on the feet. He outstrikes Prates on the feet. Here's the funny bit. He outstrikes Prates on the feet. And Garry, it looks like he's up until about the 2-minute mark, or up until the mark where Prates lands the super heavy strike on him. Garry is outstriking Prates significantly. I want to say by about 10 plus strikes. And he's cruising on his way to a victory here, to a 50-piece. And Prates then lands a really heavy strike on him. And Garry feels it and starts to retreat. And that's when Prates lands some really big strikes on Garry while he's on the ground. Okay. I don't remember if it's a drop or not. I believe it's a drop. I don't remember if it was a drop. He also gets a takedown with some ground and pound to close out the round. And he's close to finishing him. You can see it, that he's very close to finishing. And I thought in my mind for a second, oh my God, there's no way that Garry was winning this entire fight and he's about to lose in this last moment. And then the clock runs out. They get up and then the clock runs out. Amazing fight from start to finish. Amazing fight. You saw Prates actually be tested. And while there have been many times where Garry's I don't want to say has gotten close to being finished. That's not the right phrase. This is probably the first time I've seen him getting close to being finished. But you have seen moments in Garry's fights where, okay, he may lose this right here, right? He weathered the storm and got out of it. He weathered the storm and absolutely got out of it. And the Prates, while he's being tough, and he didn't quit, obviously, he got outclassed for 4 rounds. He got outstruck for 4.5 rounds. If it weren't for him landing the heavy strike, there's a chance here that he gets outstruck for 5 rounds straight, but he doesn't. He gets close to finishing him, and he just doesn't. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Great card. I enjoyed every bit of it. All the narratives, all the fights. Yeah. So that's about it. Thank you all for listening, and God bless.